What if the evidence you think proves your organization's readiness is nothing more than an illusion, a comforting story you tell yourself that falls apart under real scrutiny? Several years ago, I was in a board meeting where the CEO was presenting a monitoring report, and the report was about treatment of staff. Board members had just come back from a monitoring workshop with one of my colleagues at the governance coach, and they were really on their toes. So when the CEO presented his report, they gave it appropriate duty of care. One item in particular wasn't being well received. It was the report for the statement, "The CEO shall not allow staff to be unprepared for emergencies." Whatever the CEO's report was, the board wasn't buying it. The CEO tried to persuade them that the report showed compliance, but it wasn't working. And finally, the CEO threw up his hands and said, "Look, everybody knows where the first aid kit is." Everybody was a staff of 3, including the CEO, and 2 of those staff were part-time. I don't remember how the board concluded the monitoring discussion, but what does stand out for me happened a few days later when I was in their offices. There, on the front counter, was a brand new first aid kit, still in its cellophane package. I thought, this is interesting. What a coincidence. As it happened, no one actually knew where the first aid kit had been because they hadn't had one. Sometime earlier, the organization had shared office space with another small organization. Both organizations left that space, each going their own direction. The first aid kit, it went with the other organization. Now, I know the CEO well enough to know that he was embarrassed and that he sincerely believed had the need arrived, any of the staff could have found the first aid kit. And that's the issue. Belief isn't evidence, and it certainly won't produce a first aid kit in a real emergency. Had the CEO quizzed the staff in a staff meeting, "Do you know where the first aid kit is? Tell me where to find it," he would have had evidence in the form of their responses. And he probably would have bought the new first aid kit a fair bit sooner. By now, some of you are thinking, what about emergencies which don't involve a first aid kit? For example, in the event of a fire, staff should know how to exit the building without stopping to retrieve things, including the first aid kit. And I agree with you. Even for a very small operation, the report needed to address more than the first aid kit. But the lesson here is about the source portrayed as evidence. And this CEO's error was more common than you might think. We review countless monitoring reports, and it's not unusual to see CEOs presenting reports which at best do not tell the reader how the CEO knows that the evidence asserted is real. Worse is that the CEO might not know if there is real evidence, although they might well believe that all is on track. Reports such as the following are classic. "I've received no complaints that staff were not aware of the performance standards by which they be assessed." Do staff even know that there are performance standards that they're supposed to be assessed by? "I'm not aware of any safety issues." Thankfully, there have been no incidents, at least not just yet. The CFO said that we are up to date on payments. For this last one, the board should be asking, well, how does the CFO know? We also see some excellent monitoring reports. To illustrate, the board of the Lloydminster and District Cooperative Association directed that the CEO not permit violation of member confidentiality and privacy except where otherwise required by legislation. The CEO set out to demonstrate compliance in part by showing that access to the general membership's files was restricted only to staff that needed that access. Now, instead of just saying only those staff who need the information access the information, or we have a policy that only certain staff can access the information, his report went straight to the heart of the matter. An examination of the security logs confirmed that only those staff who were supposed to have access to member files had actually accessed them. Based on the report, the board knew that someone had examined the logs. And if the board chose to, it could replicate those findings with an external, unbiased person checking those same logs. In fairness, some policies are more challenging to monitor, at least at first blush. For example, if the board's policy restricts the CEO from buying any real estate, how does the CEO provide evidence that she didn't do so? For the CEO, it helps to imagine someone from outside the organization being asked to find the evidence and to consider where they would see evidence if property had been purchased. To illustrate, what change would show in the financial statements if the CEO had bought property? If that change is not showing in the financials, that would represent evidence that the CEO actually hadn't bought property. Monitoring is how the board determines if things are on track. And as I've said before, it plays a key part in a board member's duty of care. So the board needs to have confidence that the information it receives is based on real observations, not just beliefs, regardless of how sincere they may be.